Hello, everybody. I'd like to share this week a insight from the Beis Halevi, our Rav Soloveitchik's namesake and great-grandfather, on a particular pasuk that we're all familiar with from davening that takes place at the time of the crossing of Yam Suf. Vayar Yisrael Seyod HaGedolah Asher Asa Hashem b'Mitzrayim. And Israel saw the great hand that God had exhibited as he took the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim. Vayiru'u ha'ames Hashem, vayaminu b'Hashem uv'Moshe avdo. And thus now the people feared Hashem and showed belief in him and in Moshe Rabbeinu. The Beis Halevi asks a very simple question. Now at Yam Suf is when they finally come to revere or fear Hashem. What? Because of the miracle of Kriyas Yam Suf? What about all the miracles of the Aseret Hamakot that were brought upon the Egyptians? They surely saw the great hand of God then as well. They didn't put faith in him. They didn't revere or have awe of him until now. So the Beis Halevi says we have to categorize the nisim that were done in Egypt as distinct from those nisim that appear at Yam Suf. The nisim in Mitzrayim can all be grouped together, whereby the ikar of the nes, the main thrust of the miracle, was God supernaturally, if you will, bringing makos upon the Egyptians as punishment for their behavior, and as a result of that, there came a degree of relief for Am Yisrael, sometimes momentary, but some of them actually were steps towards the Geula, and we find that in fact these miracles were not what Am Yisrael deserved. As the pasuk states, Va'at Erom ve'Eryah, when it comes to worthiness, we were naked. We had no zchuyot that warranted our deliverance at the time. Beyond that, we know that God had foretold to Abraham 400 years of being in a land that was not their own, when in fact at this point Am Yisrael was only 210 years in Egypt. Or when the Jewish people are told not to leave their homes on the night of Makas Bechoros, but rather they should remain busied with Dam Bris Milah and Dam HaPesach, the Korban Pesach. Why? Because they too needed protection. They were not worthy of being able to wander the streets of Egypt and to be saved from the plague of Makas Bechoros. They had to stay indoors. All of this was God demonstrating Midas Hadin to Egypt, and a byproduct, an ensuing result was the development of salvation for Am Yisrael. This is what pertains to the miracles in Egypt. The miracles by Yam Suf are the exact reverse. The main thrust of the miracle of Kriyas Yam Suf was not to punish the Egyptians. It was to allow safe passage for Am Yisrael through the obstacle of the sea, to give them a sense of being saved. And Mimela, as a byproduct of that, when the Egyptians pursued them, then in natural fashion, they drowned in Yam Suf. This was a demonstration of God's Midas HaChesed to Bnei Yisrael in the merit of their having fulfilled the mitzvah of Dam Pesach and Dam Milah. Now, in the natural course of events, when a person witnesses the divine Midas Hadin, one would expect him to be imbued with a sense of yira, of awe, of reverence, of fear, if you will, as one contemplates God's Midas Hadin. And when one contemplates God's Midas HaChesed, Midas HaRachamim, one would assume that the individual would thus be filled not with yira as much as ahava, love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But here at Yam Suf, where God was demonstrating his Midas HaRachamim, his chesed towards Am Yisrael with Kriyas Yam Suf, when they saw that Mimela, God's demonstration of Midas Hadin ensues as the Egyptians drown in the sea, even though this was primarily an act of Chaste Hashem, they were surprisingly filled with a tremendous amount of yira. And this is noteworthy, not because they had no yira of God beforehand, but because even though they were in the midst of experiencing towards them God's chesed, God's rachamim, they were awed by it as they saw the result. And this is what is noteworthy. Vayira'u ha'am as Hashem. I think that there are two lessons, perhaps. Number one, that not all the time are things primarily about us as a nation and about us as individuals. Sometimes we benefit when the focus is elsewhere. And at other times, the main focus is perhaps upon us. And the other thing is to remind us how difficult it is to fathom the majesty and the grandeur of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where God can be working through Midas Hadin, and yet there exudes chesed, and vice versa. God is working with chesed and rachamim, and nonetheless, Midas Hadin is exhibited as well. Only the Ribono Shel Olam can mix opposites together, side by side, in an amazing display of his uniqueness. Shabbat Shalom Umevorach.